Hello, welcome everybody. We've got about 1 minute until we kick it off for day 3 of TOPkit Workshop 2024. Super exciting day for us today. You will see up on my screen that we are thanking you for sharing your local gems. Like I said, we've had 2 days of fantastic speakers, so that's been super exciting. You will see that I have 2 pictures here of travelers that look like they're kind of worse for wear traveling in Florida. But what's kind of unique about them, I will disclose in about 1 minute, probably less than that now. But again, welcome everybody, and we'll kick off right at 1 o'clock. All right. It is now 1 p.m. and we are officially opening TOPkit Workshop 2024 for day 3. As it shows on my screen, I want to thank all of you for sharing your local gems, those that have done that in day 1 and 2, and for those of you that have joined us here in day 3 as presenters, and also to all of our attendees. The chats and the discussions that have been going on in the rooms have just been fantastic. I've seen emails and contacts flying and relationships building, so I'm super excited for what this workshop has been able to give and what we've been getting in return for it. So thank you all for your participation. You will see on the screen that there are 2 gentlemen looking a little worse for wear. These are pictures of sculptures, and I'm not sure if you've seen them before, but they are both bronze sculptures created by Dwayne Hansen. The one in the bottom laying on the floor looking pretty worse for wear, he is actually in our Orlando International Airport. And it was neat when I first put it up because we have some local Orlando people that did not know this hidden gem was there. And then the second one up in the top right, where he's sitting in the folding chair, he is also a bronze sculpture, and he's same artist, and he is in the Fort Lauderdale airport. And again, I had no idea he was there. But it really got me to thinking. We kind of started this off as our hidden gems and how we have hidden gems that we're doing, whether we've got great quality rubrics going on, or we have accessibility standards, or AI protocol. I mean, we have so much, and I don't think any of us are purposely hiding these gems, but sometimes they're hidden. It's hard for people who don't know where they are to find them. And it's so great that we've come together these past couple of days and started sharing our local gems. And I just want to let you know that we want to promote that you keep sharing your local gems with us. And we think TOPkit's a great place to start. Our website can host your materials or direct people to your materials. We have a digest or Ask Addie publications where you can share current or local events. So please just don't forget that this might be a way for us to really come together at topkit.org and share some of our local gems. So thank you so much for joining us today. Very quickly, I just want to go over our schedule. So as you see right now, I'm kind of kicking it off with our welcome. In just a couple of minutes, I'm going to turn it over for our keynote speaker. Then we have a little bit of a break, and we'll go right into our concurrent work sessions. We will end today with a student panel, which I always love hearing from the students. I just don't think I get them forward facing as much as I would like to get their feedback. So I'm excited to have this panel with us. And then we'll be wrapping it up and doing our closing at the very end around 3:50. So thank you so much again for joining us today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to introduce our keynote speaker. Sid, thank you so much for being here with us today. Sid is from the University of Florida. He is the chair of their English department. He is also an expert on generative AI. I've been fortunate enough to see him speak in other places. Super excited to have him with us here today. He is the founding director of Trace Innovation Initiatives at UF. He is a digital thought leader with Adobe. He's a member of the Florida Institute for National Security, also a member of the Florida AI Initiative. And he's done many publications, authored and edited articles in various places. And he says his current research project right now is examining enduring questions motivated by AI. And like I said, what a great topic to have. He is a wonderful presenter. We're so excited to have him today. Oops, sorry, clicked over. And so he's going to be presenting to us generative AI in the classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Turn it over to you, Sid. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know if you would like me to monitor the chat. anything else. So please just keep me posted, and I turn it over to you.
Monitoring the chat would be fantastic. Thank you, Sue. I'm going to share my screen in a moment, and once I do that, it'll probably take me a second to make sure that you all are seeing the correct window. But Sue, thank you so much for that introduction. Thanks for having me. I'm always excited to have these conversations, particularly when we are here in Florida. And of course, I'm looking through the participant list, and wow, so many friends and colleagues and new faces. You know, hey, Lupita and Ariel, I see you, Rebecca, Leota, everybody, hi. Let me go ahead and share the screen and make sure that I can get this. I haven't, it's always weird trying to get the slideshow to start at the beginning with the share screen without taking everything over. All right, well, we'll just have to go with it like this. So I cannot see the chat,
Okay.
which is good also because I don't want to lose train of thought and start responding to chat questions. Can everybody see my title screen? Are we good there, Sue?
Yes, I can see it.
Thanks for the thumbs up, Rebecca. So yeah, I want to talk about generative AI. For those of you in Florida also, and I did not put a screen in about this, I realized as Sue was talking that what was not mentioned there is that I'm also on the steering committee for the recently formed Florida Consortium for AI Learning, Falcon for short, and I can make sure you all get invitations to join Falcon. This is an open consortium for anyone in the state who's working with AI, both in the state college system and in the SUS as well. So I will make sure you all have information for that. I want to start with a short video. I show this with at all of the talks that I give. It's about 17 seconds long. Some of you have probably seen it before if you've seen me talk before. There is no audio, so don't worry that your monitor is messing up or anything like that. And I'm going to show this as sort of a way to set the tenor for how I want to talk about generative AI in classrooms and higher ed and things like that today. So here's the video. So that's how I'm thinking about AI these days. We're playing with a different kind of rules. We're operating with a co-player who doesn't quite understand the rules. And if you notice there was that pause before the third circle was added to suggest that the machine is having to think through this context. It's not thinking, that's metaphoric, but I find it interesting that they've added that there. So just kind of a way to set the tenor. And as we're working through this, I also have to say that this concept of AI and generative AI and how we're integrating it into higher education, into classrooms, into instructional design. This is a massive subject. And I'm only going to be able to cover sort of the tip of the iceberg here today. And I want to say that out front because there are a lot of details and a lot of rabbit holes and warrens I could go down to really talk about some of the bigger details here. But we're going to stay up on the surface, above the surface, and really kind of look at the tip of the iceberg just to initiate that conversation and just to get things moving. The other thing I want to introduce and talk a lot about as I talk today about generative AI is this concept of what comes next. And what I mean by that is that artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence really give us an opportunity to think about the future of what higher ed is. And what I worry about is that we're going to get trapped into a conversation specifically about how can AI simply help me do the things that I've always done. And so we'll talk about some efficiencies and how AI can help us with the things that we already do as educators. But I also want to spend some time thinking about what else could we be doing? What comes next for us in higher ed? And I think that since November of 2022, when OpenAI dropped ChatGPT on us, that has sort of facilitated that opportunity to have that conversation of what comes next in higher ed. In order to get there, and since we're about a month away from Passover, I want to start off by talking about the parable of Bubby's brisket. Now, if you know the parable of Bubby's brisket, please don't shout out the answers and give it away. But I want to talk about Bubby's brisket as a way of how we think about higher ed and how we think about what we do as instructors and some ways that AI might influence this. So the way the story goes is that one Passover, Bubby was a young mother was preparing brisket for the Seder, and her two small children are watching her cook the brisket. And the mother takes the brisket and she takes a pair of kitchen shears and she snips off the two ends of the brisket, puts the brisket into the roasting pan, and puts the brisket into the oven. And the young children say, "Hey, Mom, why do you cut the ends off the brisket?" And she pauses and she says, Bubby used to do it that way. Let's call her and ask her why she snips the ends of the brisket. So they get on the phone and the grandchildren say, "Hey, Bubby, why do you cut the ends off of the brisket when you're making the brisket for Passover?" And Bubby says, "Years ago, when Papa and I got married, we were given a beautiful roasting pan as part of our wedding gift. And on Passover, when I went to make the brisket, Papa went out and bought a fantastic brisket and it wouldn't fit in the roasting pan. So I took a pair of scissors and I snipped off the ends. And that's just how I've done it ever since." So that's the parable of Bubby's brisket. And that is a lot of the things we do because somebody else did them. They're part of our tradition. And we actually don't know why we do. We don't know why we snip the ends of the brisket. The reason we snipped the ends of the brisket was because that was what fit at that time. That's how I want us to think a little bit about AI and a little bit about generative AI as we think about classrooms and instructional design. Now, the other thing that I want us to think about also is the fact that a lot of the conversation that we're having here today, that we've been having for the last year and a few months about generative AI and artificial intelligence, has been pushed forward because, like I said, OpenAI dropped ChatGPT on us back in November of 23. Now, excuse me, 22. What that did, and the only reason we're really having this conversation was because OpenAI was free and it gave everybody the opportunity now to encounter and engage ChatGPT. But here's the thing about ChatGPT. It uses a large language model. That's the data set that it refers to. That is the internet. And that's in a lot of reasons why we run into a lot of the problems we see with ChatGPT, our students using it, or how we use it. And one of the things that has happened over the last year is that we've started to see more than 1,000 new Gen Tech platforms being released each week. And what I want us to keep in mind is that the majority of those platforms that are being released operate with proprietary LLMs, so they have restricted data sets, they're subscription based, they're not free, and that they're disciplinarily specific. That is, they meet a very specific industry or discipline need. And part of what we have to remember as we're talking about AI and Gen AI making its way into higher education is that higher education is itself an industry. And so we're seeing platforms that are being developed specifically for our industry as educators. So one of the things that we can recognize is that ChatGPT does things that we would consider, for example, a violation of academic integrity. But we're seeing new platforms that are coming out specifically for higher education that address those issues, that put in guardrails. We also see the larger LLM that ChatGPT uses providing bad information, but we're starting to see proprietary LLMs and subscription-based platforms that are designed for higher ed, where those disciplinary specific data sets are alleviating some of the content problems that we're seeing in Gen AI and in what the output is and what our students are doing with it. So I want to keep that sort of as a background as we think through why is it that Gen AI is now working its way into higher ed and what the problems are with the free apps versus the proprietary apps. I also want to be clear that I will mention some apps throughout the conversation today, but I'm not here shilling for any app. So I don't have favorite apps. I look at lots of different kinds of apps for different contexts. I'm not going to recommend to you which apps you should be using for different tasks. Those things require different kinds of investigations of what they provide, but I will mention a few as we work through the day. Now, I also want to use as kind of a really rudimentary way of talking about AI and Gen AI today to talk and think about artificial intelligence as an analysis process. That is, AI analyzes lots of data. Generative artificial intelligence we can think of in terms of production. It takes large quantities of data, reorganizes it in order to produce something that appears to be new, even though it's actually not. So when I talk about AI, I'm specifically talking about tools that are analytical. And when I'm talking about Gen AI, I'm talking about tools that are specifically productive. The other thing I want to, with that notion developed, is I really want to work away from talking about generative AI in particular as making ChatGPT the Xerox Band-Aid Kleenex kind of version of Gen AI. That is, when I'm talking about Gen AI, my reference point is not inherently ChatGPT. Just because that's the primary platform used right now, it's got too many problems. And I'd like to think of all the other very disciplinarily specific platforms that serve us as educators rather than ChatGPT being the go-to. There are a lot of resources out there for finding platforms that are going to be useful in your classrooms or in your instructional design teams or in any kind of prep work that you're doing with AI. I had started last year to try to build a database of AI platforms specifically for higher ed, and I put together a database of about 275, 300 applications. But I realized two things. First was these applications are being bought and shut down, and new ones are popping up faster than I could keep up with it. And there are platforms like others, some of these and some others that already do the tracking. So that stuff's already out there. The other thing I want to emphasize is that when I'm talking about AI, Gen AI today, I'm specifically talking about augmentation and not over the work to the AI. I'm talking about using AI and Gen AI to augment what we already do. Whenever I think about AI, we have to recognize that, or whenever we talk about AI, we have to recognize that AI and Gen AI require three things. One is a lot of data. Two is some computers with high processing capacities. And then three, expertise, that the human has to be involved in the loop, particularly in terms of education. So I'm always thinking of it in terms of augmentation, not automation. This is also where, when we think about instructional design, we want to start thinking about the AI as a co-designer, a partner in what we're doing, and as a collaborator rather than a default go do the work for us kind of thing. I also want to emphasize for this today. And by that is a lot of the platforms that we work with or that we ask our students to work with, they have some very specific privacy statements, and we need to be aware of what kind of data, for instance, ChatGPT is taking from our students when we require them to use ChatGPT. I really recommend that if you're working with ChatGPT in particular, that you read the privacy statement before you determine what you want your students doing with it. Because you are, if you're requiring them to do a project in ChatGPT, you are by default requiring them to turn over their IP to OpenAI. There's also other privacy issues in terms of personal information that ChatGPT is taking. And I have to tell you, as a quick little anecdote, I was on a campus very recently working with an AI task force and curricular design team. And I asked what they were addressing with privacy issues regarding their use of ChatGPT. And not a single faculty member on those committees understood or had even recognized that ChatGPT was taking data from their students when they required it. So one of the things that I really recommend is whatever platform you're using, that before you determine that you're going to use it or that your students are going to use it, that you look at the privacy statements of what they're taking from you, whether in terms of IP or personal information. The other thing that I really recommend is teachers, and I will admit, I've visited a lot of campuses over the last year, all over the world, and I'm opposed to blanket policies for AI use, with the exception of transparency and documentation. If you're using it, please identify it, even if you're using it to help revise your syllabus before you distribute it to your students. They need to be aware that you're using AI just as you would expect them to identify where they're using AI. So transparency becomes, for me, the primary sort of policy we all need to have for using Gen AI and other AI platforms. So let's talk about the big stuff, except assessment. I'm not going to talk about assessment yet. Let's talk about the big stuff otherwise. We'll get to assessment. So in thinking about Gen AI and AI, I want to think about some of the bigger concepts of how this is affecting what we're doing in the curriculum design, what we're doing in our classrooms, what we're doing with our students, and what the expectations are with our students. So the first thing that AI and Gen AI provides that I'm absolutely fascinated by is the opportunity to create personalized learner-centric learning paths. Now, what this means is that AI has the opportunity to analyze individual learner data, like their past performances, how they've done things on exams or assignments before, what their preferences are, what their learning paces are. And you can use that data, that analytical data, to create lesson sequences that become customized to each student. What that ultimately does is it ensures that the content is relevant and engaging for individual students. And quickly, a little example here. If you had a student, for example, who was struggling in an algebra class, but doing really well in a geometry class, you could personalize that algebra class approach to the kinds of lessons that the student's succeeding at in the geometry class to help bolster that student's approach to the information in algebra. And I have to note too that inherently this notion of personalized learning centric learning paths is already embedded in the assessment conversation. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment as well. There are a couple of really good apps that can help with these things to teach: Leap Learning, 101 School, Tutor AI. There are dozens of them out there now that are specifically designed to help you create personalized learning centric paths for individual students as you work. The other part of this then is also adaptive learning. And this is where we take the personalized learning paths and we build those for individual students. But adaptive learning takes it a step further, and it takes these personalized learning strategies and adapts them to real-time learner progress. And we can think about this as kind of like a virtual tutor, or I suppose, if we wanted to be honest about it, more like a monitor, somebody watching each student as they work through stuff. And what AI-powered adaptive learning systems do is they rely on real-time feedback. So as a student is taking an exam, for example, they can assess what direction that learner is moving in and readjust what the next lessons are, what the next strategies are. I've seen a lot of really interesting kinds of approaches to adaptive learning in online teaching, where you're working with self-paced students who are moving through a curriculum at their own pace. This way you can adjust automatically through the AI to move adaptive learning into those online classes. Um, I guess, as an example of that, we could talk about a student who's taking a coding class and is having a particular problem with a particular sequence in the code development. And the adaptive learning can shift them to a path at that moment to help them understand that concept and then redirect them back into the primary learning path that's already there. I will say, as a note here, that a lot of adaptive learning strategies that are coming out of machine learning are proving very effective, but we need to be kind of cautious with natural language processing. The algorithms for natural language processing are not ideal yet, and so there's a lot of problems with noticing things like syntax structure or different layers of ESL English learning. And so NLP is getting there, but it's not there yet. And machine learning is really kind of driving the adaptive learning part of this right now. One of the other things that I like about the adaptive learning from the instructor position is that it provides feedback also to the instructor so that you can get real-time progress with what your students are doing, so that you can adjust and that you can pay more attention to the individual learner rather than to the curriculum overall. There's some really interesting adaptive learning platforms out there. EdApp, Adaptum, Newton, KNEWTON, are some of the more popular ones that are being used right now. It also provides opportunities for enhanced engagement. And for me, this goes back to that what comes next question. How can we use AI to enhance student engagement with materials? That is, what else can we do to get students engaged with the content that we're teaching them, the stuff that we're showing them? Um, Whether that means using AI specifically to cover the basic stuff, so like in writing, for instance, so let the AI handle the spell checking and the grammar, and things like that in writing intensive courses, so that the instructor can spend more time working with the student, talking about the content, the problem solving, the critical thinking, the analysis, all the work that we want the students to do to really engage the material beyond just the fundamental. Um, this is one of those areas, in fact, that I think student engagement can be enhanced, but it also gives us as instructors the opportunity to really enhance our own engagement with the material that we're teaching. For instance, I think that in some of the demos I've seen of some platforms where an enhanced engagement platform is operating in, say, a science class, it provides opportunities to create different kinds of interactive learning scenarios, examples, opportunities to engage with case studies in ways that we just haven't had the opportunity to do so before. So that's sort of the bigger picture here with AI and designing curriculum. That's the big stuff. Being able to talk about enhanced engagement, being able to create adaptive learning paths, being able to monitor students so that you can guide them through. Those are the big questions. So let's talk about some of the specific stuff, except assessment. So let's talk about our own workflow, because in all the talks that I give all over the place, everybody wants to know about how their students are going to be using this. But I happen to think that faculty development right now is sort of our priority. That, a lot of us have that, almost that sense of, um, we don't know how to use this. How are we supposed to bring it into our classroom? And we need to also think about how we are using it in our own workflow. So I want to talk about instructional design and curriculum development in terms of workflow and what we can use it for as teachers. And I want to start off by pointing out that in the larger conversations about generative AI and about AI, the World Economic Forum is predicting that we're going to see a global increase in efficiency across all industries and all disciplines by about 40% over the next 2 years. Now, that's fascinating to me, because my first selfish question is, does that mean I get a 40% increase when my salary, when my productivity increases? No. Do I get 40% of my time back? No. It means that there will be 40% more demand on my workload. But that notion of efficiency is what I think is important here, that we're going to be more efficient with these tools. So let's talk about our own workflow efficiency, how we do things in higher ed when we're building curriculum and building instructional resources. And to do so, I want to frame this, as I said earlier, in terms of augmenting what it is we do. And so the first place we look for what we do in our own jobs is to look at how can we augment repetitive tasks, the same things that we have to do over and over again. How can we have AI and Gen AI help us with those things? Now, I have to say that in some of the AI strategy work that I do with various companies and various industries, one of the things that we have come to do as a way of figuring out what those repetitive tasks are that we could augment is something called an AI readiness survey, an AIRS, AIRS. And what we do with that is we let the employees start to figure out where in their own workflow they can start out to identify the repetitive tasks, the easy place to be able to deploy AI and what we do. Um, I want to talk then about 5 ways uh, that we can integrate AI and Gen AI into instructional design workflow or curriculum design. And I will be honest, I just randomly picked 5 ways. There are a lot of other ways, but it seemed efficient to just do a handful of them while we were talking today. So the first one is content generation, and this really is um, the easiest way to integrate AI. Because when it comes down to it, the bigger conversation about ChatGPT is really about content creation. And so when we start to really look at what are all those things that we do over and over again, a lot of it has to do with content generation. And AI is really good at doing things like rewriting information for different audiences, copy editing our written work, um, writing emails, reading emails, all that kind of stuff. But we really want to think about what our content generation is. And it's really the easiest way to get started. And to be honest about it, it's also the easiest way for us as instructors to get started to learn what the capabilities of AI are and what tools are out there for when we're working with AI. And generative AI platforms can generate pretty much any content that you need: text, images, rubrics, summaries, assignments, simulations, case studies, or entire sets of instructional materials. Gen A is also great at creating quizzes and other forms of assessment, which I said we'll talk about later. I'm not getting there yet. Um, and I also include in the concept of content generation, uh, revising and rewriting our own course materials. And let me give you a quick example what I mean by that. Uh, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I taught a course called Digital Humanities. And I taught the course prior to OpenAI dropping ChatGPT on us. And I like the course. I want to teach the course again, but if I'm teaching a course called Digital Literacy in the Humanities, I kind of have to account for all that's happened to Gen AI and what's happened to digital literacy since Gen AI came on scene. So I recently took the course description for that course and I put it into a Gen AI platform. And I said in my prompt, I wrote this description for a course in digital humanities, digital literacy in the humanities before OpenAI dropped ChatGPT. Revise it to take into account how generative AI and AI have to be addressed in this course. And I blinked and I had a new course description that it spit out. It was 100% fantastic. It was accurate. It was not Chat GPT. It was an academic platform. And all of a sudden, my course description had been revised, updated, and rewritten. Now, again, augmentation, I went back through and did some of my own editing, clarified a few things, but nonetheless, it saved me maybe, an hour or more of revising and thinking about my course description. But that wasn't the exciting part. The exciting part was I scrolled to the bottom of the syllabus, that part where we have the day-to-day calendar, what the reading days, what reading assignments are due, when the assessments are due, all those kinds of things. And that to me is one of the most monotonous things to have to revise in a syllabus, because now I got to look at my calendar. What day is Memorial Day? How do I split this? I dumped that into the AI and I simply said update for fall 2025 for a 15-week academic calendar. I blinked and I had it, and it was 100% accurate. It got the holiday dates, it got everything filled in. And so that monotonous activity that I have to go through every semester was made more than 40% more efficient because the AI took care of doing the schedule for me all over again. Now, that also ties into the second aspect I want to talk about, and that's curriculum development. And what we're starting to see is that data-driven curriculum design, that the AI can analyze very large data sets, including student performance data, learning outcomes, industry trends, and then identify patterns and insights that inform what our curriculum designs are. And that gives us the opportunity to use AI-driven analytics, curriculum developers then have the opportunity to make data-informed decisions about course content, about the sequencing of what you're doing in a classroom and the assessment methods, ensuring that these things all align with learning objectives, student records, all the other things that tie into how we should be planning what our curriculum are going to be. This also allows us to create content that can be customized. Gen AI tools can assist in generating customized instructional materials to suit specific learning resources, generating interactive simulations, adapting existing content to different formats. That lets the AI start to enable curriculum developers to efficiently tailor materials to very diverse learning populations. We can do this with adaptive learning systems. AI-powered adaptive learning systems can adjust the pace, the difficulty, the content of instruction based on individual student performance. We can integrate adaptive learning strategies and technologies into the curriculum, allowing developers to create personalized learning experiences. And what I find really interesting in this is being able to use predictive analytics to start to think about how we can forecast student outcomes, about how we can identify at-risk students early on, and how we can recommend interventions for students to support their academic success. Curriculum developers can use these insights to design proactive strategies for developing curriculum. And then for me, the interesting part is being able to adjust those on the fly using real-time data. Particularly when we start talking about automated data and automated feedback, AI can automate and augment a lot of these processes of assessing student work and providing timely feedback, thereby reducing the burden on the instructor and facilitating more efficient workflow. And that's, whether that's grading a multiple choice quiz or a writing assignment or analyzing an essay or evaluating code. These AI-powered assessment tools and analytical tools give us real-time feedback in a lot of really interesting ways. So again, sorry, I didn't realize I had that second slide there, but data-driven curriculum design, content customization, adaptive learning, predictive analytics, automated assessments, all of these things can help with curriculum development throughout that process. Let's talk about course design specifically then. Curriculum development and using course design, AI becomes very valuable in ensuring content meets learning objectives. We can use AI to develop lesson sequences, to develop interactive visuals, instructional visuals, interactive elements, lecture notes. AI is great for developing learning assessments. And what I find interesting is AI can develop quizzes and then assess quizzes and other kinds of materials for you. And I got to tell you, another quick little anecdote. When I was writing my big freshman English textbook, that of course had to have a test bank in it because you can't sell a textbook without a test bank. The most annoying thing for me in writing quizzes to attach to each chapter and each learning outcome was coming up with what they call distractors. These are the wrong answers in a multiple choice series of questions. You got to have the right answer, and then you got to have 3 distractors. And I don't know about you, but when you're having to think up thousands of wrong answers, that's kind of a difficult task. And if I had had an AI like this, it would have automated that process. I actually got very punchy about it with my editors and would enter wrong answers with things like taco, peanut butter, and that had absolutely nothing to do with the content of the textbook. And my editors kept telling me, A, assessments are not allowed to be funny, and B, that you have to have distractors that actually distract the student so it seems like it might be a correct answer, but not a correct answer, which I found kind of duplicitous in working with students. But all of those kinds of things will, using course design, can help with develop course flow, breaking topics into modules, suggesting recommended placement of interactive activities in the class. In other words, it can help you really design what order should you be doing things in. The next thing that I think we have to talk about in terms of instructional design and curriculum design is accessibility. Uh, when we're working with AI, it will certainly streamline our workflow, but everybody who works in education knows that we have legal and ethical responsibilities to ensure that the content we teach is accessible. AI tools can automatically generate captions for videos, transcribe audio content, provide language translations to an extent. I'll come back to that in a minute. Uh, it can ensure content is accessible to diverse audiences, including individuals of all kinds of different abilities. AI can also assist in making sure content is compliant with legal requirements to create inclusive and compliant educational materials. In other words, a lot of the labor that we have to put into making things accessible, AI can pick up that and help augment some of the efficiency in how we do that. And the final thing I want to mention then is in these 5 ways that it can make our workflow more efficient is project management. Look, we all know that if we're working in instructional design, that most of what we do is complex. It always involves multiple people, whether it's the instructional designer working with the faculty member or instructor or whomever it happens to be, and then working perhaps with the technology people, with the people who are doing the recordings of lectures. There's always a bigger pool of people working. And a lot of times, if you've worked in instructional design, you recognize that coordinating all of that is not necessarily the most efficient thing to do. There are a lot of AI-driven tools out there that can generate real-time, adaptable timelines, track milestones, facilitate collaboration. And using these kinds of efficiency promoting tools can ensure that the stakeholder involvement and alignment is always working toward the end that everybody wants. And let's face it also, because instructional design is an iterative process, that these platforms also can maintain documentation and version control of any instructional design project, so that if you have to backtrack or if you have to find where something changed, that data is always available that way. So those are the kinds of things that I think about in terms of how they can affect our own workflow. And I really do recommend that if you're going to start integrating AI into your own work, that you start small. Don't try to do everything at once. Start to feel where you're comfortable with things. Start to figure out what tools work for you and what kinds of things you don't want to surrender to AI augmentation. Okay, I've said it. Let's get to some assessment stuff. And I have to tell you, right out of the gate, that assessment is not my wheelhouse, not my forte. But I think that we have to talk about assessment when we're talking about AI, higher ed, curriculum design, instructional design. That in fact, recently I gave a talk at the Florida Association of College Test Administrators specifically about AI and assessment. And then I think it was this week or last week, University of Florida held its artificial intelligence and assessment conference, and I was on a panel for that. And the more that I talk with colleagues about AI and assessment, the more I realize that this really has to be almost the starting place of where we're thinking about and talking about AI integration into higher education. Um, so let's talk a little bit about assessment. And I want to start off by talking about, well, before I talk about automated grading, what I want to just kind of point out is that AI, and again, AI as an analytical tool, not Gen AI as a productive tool, but AI can really do some amazing things in assessing and analyzing assessment data. It can scale that data. It can provide instructors with all kinds of insights into student performance, into their learning trends, into their learning gaps, where they can improve. And by leveraging machine learning algorithms, instructors can identify patterns in student responses, track progress over time, and tailor their instructional interventions to address individual or group learning needs more effectively. I've talked about adaptive assessment a little bit, about using assessments to figure out where individual students are at any given moment. Those things become very viable, very useful in how we're talking about stuff. So let's talk about some assessment methods. Automated grading. Now, automated grading is where the AI does all of the grading. This can be useful in some places like I mentioned, uh, multiple choice, short fill in the blank, where the answers are kind of concrete. Where automated grading becomes problematic is in anything tied to natural language processing. Sure, it can tell if there are spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes in an essay, but it doesn't have the ability to really look at the higher level, higher order kinds of things like stylistics or problem solving or critical thinking. So it becomes useful in automated grading, but we have to be very careful of that right now in terms of the difference between that which is machine learning graded and that which is natural language process graded. I think that it's very valuable in assessment data analysis, that it can point to things that we don't necessarily see as teachers when we're looking at our grading data. Um, and so analysis again becomes very important in AI and assessment. Again, the adaptive assessment. The adaptive assessment to me is really where I think that we're going to see more intervention and more development as these kinds of self-engaged assessment experiences are going to be more accurately gauging students' knowledge levels while doing things like creating new kinds of assessments that are designed to alleviate test anxiety or to find more customized kinds of assessments. I don't have it anywhere in my slide deck, but I've been thinking a lot and writing about lately also the different tiers of assessment and adaptive assessment. Because while adaptive assessment seems very beneficial in the classroom level, but when you start elevating up the line in terms of assessment, there's going to be a point at which adaptive assessment is going to have to be set aside, particularly when we start looking at credentialing assessment. So, for example, let's assume that we have a student who's working through a bio major and through adaptive assessment and customized learning paths has moved through the pattern very successfully. However, there's going to be a point at which the assessment is going to have to hit benchmarks for credentialing in anything where there is a credentialing test. So the adaptive assessment wouldn't be effective there. You wouldn't want an adaptive assessment, say, for a medical certification, because you want to have that across the board credentialing. So I think that there's going to be some interesting conversations coming up about where is adaptive assessment, what kind of learners does adaptive assessment cater to, and then what happens in the larger scheme of how we're doing assessment toward credentialing and benchmarking. I also think that the analytical work in predicting what students can perform, what they're going to do moving forward is interesting, but I will tell you that I am very cautious of performance prediction. I think that it risks different kinds of um, incongruities. I think that this is where the risk of algorithmic bias comes into play. I think this is where the risk of inaccurate analytical information guiding students in wrong directions. But I also recognize that this is a very early technology in AI and assessment. And so we're going to see performance prediction work in different ways as it evolves. Um, Finally, let's talk about integrity, because it seems to me that wherever I go, anybody wants to talk about Gen AI, and I blame mass media on this. Everybody wants to talk about, well, isn't this just a plagiarism tool? It's not, and it's got a lot to do with what your students are actually doing with it. It's not a magic box. You can't just ask Gen AI to give you what you want and it will. It's an iterative process as well. But I also think we have to talk about integrity. I prefer to talk with students about responsible use rather than necessarily academic integrity. I could do an entire workshop right now for the rest of the afternoon on academic integrity and AI, but that was not what uh, the TOPkit crew asked me to talk about. But I do think if we're going to talk about academic integrity and Gen AI use, I prefer that we talk about academic, professional, personal, and civic integrity. that we use this as an opportunity to talk to students about AI deployment across all of the ways that they might be able to use it rather than just plagiarism. Um, I also think we have to mention, I guess I said final, so that was penultimate. I also think we have to talk about workplace readiness, particularly because so many of our institutions of higher education are focused on workplace readiness. A lot of our funding money comes from that. And in order to talk about workplace readiness, what I want to recognize is that for the past 10 years or so, every campus in the country has been talking about digital literacy. Every campus talks about what do our students need to know to go into the workplace. And so we have to start asking a question, not just about workplace readiness, but about AI readiness and what our AI competencies are. So when we talk about career readiness, in the same breath, we now have to talk about AI readiness. And you all have heard, throughout your entire careers that employers always have that list of skills that they want college graduates to have before they come work for them. And at the top of that list is always solid written communication skills and spoken communication skills. But what we're seeing now is that AI literacy is now rising to be the second most thing that employers want from college graduates. And so then the question becomes, where in the curriculum do we start employing and discussing AI readiness and AI literacy? And I think that now has to step into, gotcha, Stu, thanks. Step into where we talk about digital literacy. These have to be disciplinarily specific. There have to be general skill approaches, AI concepts, data handling. It's amazing how many employers now are interested in data privacy and security, wanting to make sure that their employees understand data privacy concepts. We also know that because the way that AI is changing global economies, and the World Economic Forum is estimating that by 2030, the GDP will increase by about 26%, about $15.7 trillion because of AI and efficiency. And I've already mentioned the productivity increase by 40%. And this is also the opportunity for us to start to rethink industry to curricula development. Now, we already do this in a lot of disciplines, particularly those disciplines where credentials are necessary to work in those areas. So whether you're talking about pharmacy, nursing, medical, engineering, HVAC, there are dozens upon dozens of disciplines in higher ed where we craft our curricula for preparing our students for those credentials. And I think we're going to see more of that industry to curriculum kind of need as we start thinking about AI literacies within the curriculum toward workplace readiness. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go a quick promo here. My AI and writing textbook is available from Broadview Press. They make great gifts throughout the year, doorstops, placemats, whatever you need them for. And that'll end it for me. If you have questions, I don't know. I'm sorry, I get to rambling about AI and I end up taking up too much time, but I hope we have Q&A time. I'm going to unshare my screen if I can remember how to unshare. Advanced sharing options. But I'm going to open it to, while I'm turning this off, go ahead, Q&A. Sue, do you want to moderate? I see that the chat has been pinging. I have not looked at any of it.
Oh, there's about 3,000 questions and we've got 3 minutes, so you should be fine. Now, we did have one, I'm kind of scrolling up, and there was one, is there a source associated with the graphic for the career readiness and AI readiness?
When you mean a source, can you clarify? I mean, are you asking for what platforms to use for that?
I will ask Anastasia to unmic if she doesn't mind clarifying.
No, it's just that's a really good graphic. I'm trying to design a AI literacy for my first year writing course, and I wanted to include something like that. But I would like to have like where you got that information from.
Oh, for the AI literacy stuff? Gosh, I'd have to go back because I've been using that slide for a while now. But if you send me an email, I can send you the link. It may. I actually think that's something I've pieced together from multiple conversations. But shoot me an email. I'm easy to find at UF, and I will gladly find that for you. The slide itself is just I made a bulleted list, and the PowerPoint automated the design. So I used an AI designer to do that.
A lot of compliments, a lot of head nodding, a lot of sharing of resources. I can't say that I see too many more new questions, but I will, like you said, just open it up if anybody would like to unmute and ask a question in the last couple minutes that we have.
I have to say, Charlotte, I'm Charlotte Jones Roberts. I'm seeing your chat, and I agree with you. Performance prediction seems risky right now, but my concern in your comment is that we're using popular media to figure out how we should think about AI, and things like Minority Report, while certainly entertaining and frightening, aren't exactly how AI actually work. So I want to be cautious that we not attribute what AI does and doesn't do to the arts.
We did have somebody ask, could you please share some PM AI tools with us? Or do you have a resource or website that might direct us to those? I too am intrigued to see some application with the PM.
I can certainly send you
Okay.
a list. I have to go back. I haven't, like I said, I put a database together with about 275 platforms for various designs, and I can certainly do. You know what? I don't know if I have right here in my notes in front of me any PM specific stuff. But Sue, if you'll send me a note, I will gladly send a list of those platforms and you can send them out to the.
Yeah, I'm jotting down a note and I can put those back up in the Socio WebEx platform. And that way I can share them with those who attended and those who maybe weren't able to make this session. So I am going to go ahead and wrap it up. Sid, thank you so much. I had a lot of head shaking on my own saying yes, yes. And then I also was feverishly writing lots of notes. So I learned a bit from your presentation today. And I just thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your calmness and friendliness talking about it all. It really helps some of those who have a little angst kind of realize that it's going to help everybody. So thank you again for your time and your expertise. And I look forward to collaborating with you in the future and hopefully implementing some of your resources. We're creating a TOPkit AI page. And so we're going to want to link out to you as often as possible. But thank you again so much for your time, Sid.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I am easy to find at UF if you'd like to talk to me directly or have other questions. And if you're in Florida, I do recommend that you join Falcon, where we continue to have these conversations in monthly meetings as well.
And that was put up in chat too. So there is a link.
Oh, thank you. Good. Wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're going to go ahead and have a little bit of a break, about 5 minutes before we get started with the next presentation, but I am going to stop sharing so that we can have our next wonderful presenter able to get in and kind of set up for everything. So Laura, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that you are in here and ready to go. Thank you again, Sid.
So did you have the code for this session?
Oh, you guys do want the code, don't you? Silly me. All right, the code is pasted into the chat. So Sid Fishes. How you doing, Laura? Is there anything that I can do on my end? Do you want to practice sharing, making sure the right one is sharing?
Yeah.
I have multiple monitors now, and that's always the big question.
I can do that. Can you hear me okay?
Wonderful.
All right, perfect.